Hey gang, Professor Feeser here, and in today's video we're going to talk about a tool called RedHat Ansible Automation Platform, or AAP. Working with a corporate customer right now, teaching them how to write Ansible code, playbooks, and then load those playbooks into AAP via syncing through GitHub or GitLab. It occurred to me there's a lot of interest in this tool, maybe what it is, are there other options, as well as an overview of what it includes and how we use it. So in today's video, I'm going to walk you through loading a playbook into Ansible Automation Platform and running it. I promise there's a bit more to AAP than just running playbooks, but let's start with that. Okay, gang, let's get started. Okay, gang, here I am signed in to AAP, and if you look kind of just above me, you can see I'm signed in here as admin. We start out on the overview screen. This is one of the features that Red Hat will tout as one of the reasons you need AAP. You got to see how your playbooks are running, right? The resource counts, hosts are just defined as things with an IP address or things we would target and go to. A project is something that's synced from GitHub or GitLab. Usually our playbooks, rule books, if you're into Ansible EDA, come from projects. Inventories are hosts that have been applied to a group. So we define hosts, their IP addresses, we place them into an inventory. You run the playbook typically against inventories, but you could run it against a host if you wanted to. Over on the left, you're going to see the drop down of all the clicky clicks that you can make in this platform. So from the top, overview, automation execution, decisions, analytics, content, Ansible light speed, access management, settings, quick starts. I'll make some videos on all of the options that you can click through. But the primary click, if the question is, Professor Feeser, how do we make a playbook run inside of AAP? That's going to be the first drop down. So let's focus our attention there. All right, so over on the left, jobs, templates, schedules, projects, infrastructure. There's a lot of clicks. I'm not going to go through all of them. But let me give you the rundown of what we need to do. We need to create an inventory. We need to add a host or hosts to that inventory. We need to make credentials in order to be able to get into host or hosts that we've defined. We might need to make credentials to be able to download projects. A project is a sync to a GitHub or GitLab. If we want something other than manual or like API triggered execution, we need to set up a schedule that's like cron. Templates are how we combine things like a playbook, a credential, a project, extra variables get defined in the template. It's called a job template. It's what actually we build before it's executed, right? Execute this is how we think of a job template. A job is actually something that's already been executed. So if I start with job, it's a brand new build of the platform. There's no jobs yet. Templates I really can't make until I define at least a project. Projects are ultimately where my playbooks are going to live. Schedules, again, it doesn't make sense to define a schedule before I have a job template built. Projects, we could start with a project. Why not? Let's go ahead and click Create Project. We're going to need to give it a name. I would say naming's important. Naming schemes are important when you're working with this tool. I'm actually going to use the namespace and the repo from my GitHub as the name of the project. I'm going to recycle that throughout everything I make with AAP. And I think that speaks to this idea that it's important to stay organized, especially if you're going to have tens of users, hundreds of users, teams, all trying to log in and do stuff here, set up projects. There's got to be some rules so that we can track more or less who's doing what or what belongs to who. And maybe just strong descriptions describing sort of your metadata style. I'll just put a sync from github.com. Organization is the attempt for AAP to have multi-tenancy. Whether it's true multi-tenancy, we could talk about, but for right now I have two organizations in there. I have default and I have student org. We'll put it in default. That's fine. That's an organization that's created when you have when you spin up the project itself. Default's already in there. Execution environments, we don't have to enroll our project with an EE. EEs are the container space in which your playbook's going to run. And we can talk about that in a video. The idea behind an execution environment is too often we have code that works one place and not another place. So the idea is don't just write a playbook, build an environment that guarantees your playbook's going to run. In that way, we stop saying things like, well, it works on my machine. It will just work always, because it's not just a solution, it's also the environment that can empower the solution. Source control type is going to be Git. Source control URL is my repository out here. And I didn't introduce that very well. This is out on GitHub. I have Acme Bank Ansible. It's just a silly little repository. It's not much. It's got a few playbooks in it. Playbooks 1 through 8 that all do something slightly different. If we look at the first one, perfect. It wants to run against a local host, doesn't want to gather facts, print something out on the screen, make an API call with the URI module, and then print those out to the screen. Cool. As far as best practice, sure, honestly, we could have fully qualified collection names on these, but as long as things are within the standard library, Ansible.built-in, it'll still work, right? So we could imagine Ansible.built-in a couple places around here, but Playbook 01 will be great. So let's hop back to our platform. This is a public repository. I'm targeting the main branch. Because it's public, I don't have to build a credential for it. If I needed to do that, you can do that in credentials, source control credential. The options are a little confusing. Clean, update, revisional, and launch, delete, allow, branch override, track submodule. The one I think's worth clicking is update, revisional, and launch if it works with your paradigm. The idea, every time a job runs this project, update the revision of the project prior to starting the job. So a project's tied into a job template. When a job template is run, it becomes a job. And what they're saying is, before that job runs, do you want to go sync? Get the latest copy of what is out on GitHub. I think that's valuable. I'm going to click that and then say create project. Okay, fantastic. The RZFeeser Acme Bank Ansible project has been created and it is successfully synced. That means it actually pulled my project, like the latest commit, off of GitHub, this right here, this repository right here, synced it to actually the database of AAP. So a copy of this is actually in AAP right now. Next, we need to be able to target something. Even though this says run against local hosts, we still need to describe local hosts. And it'll give us a chance to look at inventories and hosts. Down here, I'm going to click on inventories, and I can see I have a demo inventory that's in the default organization, and student XX, that's in student org. I'll put another inventory in default here. So I'll create inventory and I'll call this one, sure, RZFeeser Acme Bank Ansible. The organization belongs to default in this case. I want to keep everything within the same org. Variables be like group variables, things I wanted to group vars that I wanted to pass to the entire inventory. I don't have any of those, so I'm just going to hit create inventory. Now that's currently empty. It's just a name. I have to add hosts to it. So I'm going to go to hosts. I'm going to create a host and I'll call this localhost. And then down here is where I would put my host variables. So things like Ansible host, localhost, Ansible connection, Ansible.builtin, .local. Gang, if you're having a little trouble keeping up with like, wait a second, Ansible host, Ansible connection, what's that? That requires an understanding of Ansible. I should point out that AAP implies you're going to have Ansible training as well, or already have had Ansible training. If you come into this blind, you could use it, like if jobs are set up, or if you understood the API, you could trigger jobs from it. But you are going to be pretty lost as far as like, what are these different boxes, or what is it asking? Even if you understand Ansible, it's a little abstract the way it pulls these ideas together. So if you are planning on an AAP initiative, make sure your staff or yourself is trained up well on Ansible, or you're going to be getting ahead of yourself just a little bit. All right, so inventories, hosts. Again, if you're going, well, Professor Feeser, come on, machines, show us a SSH say to something. We can do that in a future one. I am just making API calls with this playbook, so it doesn't make sense. But if we wanted to define credentials for some host or hosts we're SSHing or WinRMing to, you could. And then it's nothing more than repeating what I just showed you. It's build the inventory, add a few hosts to it, right? Define their Ansible host variable as an actual IP address. Define the Ansible connection as Ansible built-in SSH. And you're good. Okay, so let's suppose we have a target, we have an inventory. We have, assumedly, credentials loaded both for our project. We have credentials loaded for our hosts if we needed them. We have a project loaded. I think we're ready to build the template already. As far as execution environments go, which you do need an execution space, they give you a default execution space, default execution environment. You would just think of as effectively Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8. Whatever software you're going to get with Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8 is going to be included in this default execution environment. But the idea is build your own, upload them, and in that way you can have all the software you need to drive your playbooks local to your playbook. I'm going to click on template. We're going to create a template. And again, predictable. I'm going to use the same name. I'm then just going to put an underscore in playbook 01 because that's the playbook I'm going to run. It's going to be a run. The inventory, we've defined our own inventory. That just defines local host. The project we defined, that's actually says here are the playbooks that are available. So you'll see here I have a drop down with all the same playbooks. If I remove that project though, I wouldn't see those. So if I go to demo project, playbook is just a hello world now. So let's sync back to my GitHub. I can see playbook 01, that's the one with the API call. Execution environment, I don't have to pick anything. It'll automatically pick default EE. Credentials, there's no credentials. We're just making API calls to open APIs. It's actually a data set that shows us, it's either the location of the ISS or the astronauts currently in space. I forget which one this one targets. Policy enforcement, labels, forks, limits, verbosity, job slicing. Most of these would be very understandable if you studied Ansible. Everything from limits to verbosity, forks. Job slicing might be a bit unique. Job slicing is how many execution environments should we make to help divide up the job itself. So if you were targeting 50 hosts, you might say, well, we'll make job slicing 2. Then we have 2 execution environments. We can give 25 copies of the playbook to one execution environment, 25 copies of the playbook to the other execution environment. Hopefully get done twice as fast as we would otherwise. A little bit different than forks. Forks is how many concurrent hosts can a single execution environment run against. So typically it's 5. The fact it's set to 0 just means the default of 5 or 10 is going to get used. But again, brush up on your Ansible if something looks a little weird here. Extra variables always win precedence at runtime. So there's an opportunity to control how the solution might actually execute. Enabling webhooks, enabling fact storage. I don't see anything else here that we need to be concerned with, so I'm going to hit Create Job Template. And finally, with that, we should be able to hit Launch Template. It might not work. If it does fail, it's a learning opportunity. But I think it should work. What could we have possibly forgotten? We have our project, we have our inventory, we have our hosts. Yeah, look at it go. So at this point, if you're familiar with, oh, you know what could mess it up is if the API call, if that host doesn't respond, if I chose, oh, nope, it did. I was going to say if just the API had a timeout. The HTTP call took a long time. It was good, though. It was successful. Fantastic. That's great. And I was saying if you're familiar with Ansible, you're going to recognize what you're seeing here. This is the output of a playbook. This is Playbook 01 running. There's welcome to the Acme. Thank you, AAP. Welcome to the Acme Intergalactic Savings Loan Playbook. Here is where we made the API request, called that URI. We registered the results, and then we printed them out to the screen. So that's, thank you, AP. That's where all the details of the results are actually showing, and they are cut off there. You can see they have the, quite a few lines snipped for us. Details will tell you everything about the job itself. At this point, we could schedule a future run for it. We could also call it with an API. We could set up a webhook. Ansible also has this new thing called Event-Driven Ansible, EDA. It allows you to effectively set up like a webhook, a smart webhook, like a listener, a custom listener, and just watch for things happening. So you could build a webhook that when you sent it a particular word, right? Or when it saw a particular word in a payload, it would react a certain way. So lots and lots and lots of ways to ultimately trigger your work. But if we click on jobs, we can see not only are there completed jobs for when we synced from the project, but there's also evidence that the playbook itself was successful. If we go back in there, you can see there's the results. Wow, gang, that was awesome. In, 20 minutes, we were able to log into AAP for the first time, define a GitHub or GitLab repository as a project, create possibly some credentials that could be used to sync that project and or connect to hosts, build an inventory, put hosts in that inventory, combine all of that into a template. And then we learned when we execute a template, it becomes a job, where a job includes all of the metadata, the history of how that playbook, how that execution actually performed. Here on the overview page, you can see 3 successes so far, so business is good. Gang, I hope you learned something today. If you did, give me a like, hit subscribe. I want to see you on the next episode of Code with Feeser.